differences between Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox and Christians and Islam and Jewish people as in most other countries in Europe. He made quite amusing reforms as well. The Viennese have a very close relationship to death. They love a good send-off. They enjoy funerals. They have to be lavish affairs with many dozens, if not hundreds of candles, many dignitaries and so on, no matter from what class you are from. And he uses made a reform, you're only allowed to have one candle per funeral, because candles are expensive. Imagine the face of the Viennese people, who had dozens and hundreds of candles. He didn't stop there, he also made a reform about coffins. He invented the reusable coffin. So a coffin where you put the dead person in, you move the coffin over the grave, below the coffin a trapdoor opens, and then the body falls out, and then you can reuse it 100 times, 1,000 times maybe. It depends how long the wood lasts. Very, very great invention. It saves trees, very environmentally friendly, very economically friendly. You don't need to cut down as many trees. Don't know why the people didn't like it. However, I think even if you would reintroduce this invention today, people probably still wouldn't accept it because they would just say no respect before the dead and so on. But from an environmentally friendly standpoint of view, this was actually quite a good invention. The people still didn't like him, however, because in the 10 years he ruled on his own without his mother, between 1780 and 1790, he produced more than 6,000 reforms. Just imagine, that is more than 1.5 reforms a day. That is why the people didn't like him, because it was just too much for them. They couldn't keep up with it. And when he died, the people were dancing and celebrating on the streets, the church bells were ringing, everyone was happy that they are finally rid of this reforming man. And good send-off, yeah, good send-off. We have it there, yeah. They love good funerals. And then his brother Leopold took over because Joseph didn't have any children on his own. His brother Leopold only ruled 2 years, poor guy, then he died himself. But in these 2 years he was busy undoing many of the reforms of his older brother, because otherwise the rebellion might have. He didn't want to. He was a supporter of the Enlightenment as well, and very liberal and progressive, but he didn't really have a choice. And then he died, and some of the reforms stayed, but many of them were, undone again. And Austria became conservative again. You might wonder why he's shown or depicted as a Roman emperor, even though he lived in the late 18th century. This was political propaganda. The Habsburgs saw themselves very much as the new Romans, so to speak, the successors of the old Roman Empire. They were great, they were powerful, therefore they wanted to connect to them politically speaking, and many sculptures of the late 18th and also early 19th century show Habsburg rulers as emperors or consuls, Roman consuls with laurel vests and so on. It's political propaganda. Of course, he never ran around like that. But some of you might have been already to Rome. You probably certainly visited Rome already. Oh yeah, of course, being Italian. In Rome, there's a very famous monument of Mark Aurel, Emperor Mark Aurel. And this is very similar. It's actually more or less a copy of the Mark Aurel monument. At least the posture of the horse and the gesture of the hand is exactly the same. Maybe the head is different, but the Mark Aurel monument is an antique monument, from the old Roman times. This is from the early 1800s, so that is the main difference about it. Noticing it because it's just a little connecting courtyard. This is the apsis of the Imperial Chapel. The Imperial Chapel goes back to the 13th century, and this used to be the private chapel of the imperial family. And it's culturally very important because more than 500 years ago, the court orchestra was founded here the imperial court orchestra was founded here in the Imperial Chapel. And heirs of the court orchestra today are two very important Viennese institutions. Many of you probably have heard of them already. They're the Vienna Boys Choir and the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Both have their roots here in this chapel. I do apologize. The gentleman who just passed us in the suit while I was talking was actually the president of our parliament, which startled me for a moment. So he just okay. So I was like a bit thrown off. So
He knew you.
At least he pretended to know me. I don't know. It's one of these things. If people have a certain popularity, they expect you just to nod back if they nod at you because they know you know them. So, but yeah. We are now in the Swiss court. The Swiss court. Well, what do the Swiss have to do with Vienna? Not particularly much. However, here in Vienna was also a Swiss guard, such as there is still a Swiss guard today in the Vatican. The one in the Vatican is the only Swiss guard still existing today. However, during the Baroque era, it was very fashionable for courts, or royal and ducal courts around Europe to have their own Swiss guard. The House of Oranje in the Netherlands had one, the French had one, the Spanish had even two. The Italians had one anyway with the Vatican, and so most courts had one because the Swiss had a great reputation for bravery and they were known to be as very courageous, and they were also known to be as very loyal, and they were very loyal to the person paying them, of course, and Austria didn't want to miss out, so they had to have a Swiss guard here in Vienna as well, under the time of Maria Theresia, her again, and her husband. The Swiss guard here was raised. It didn't last very long, just about one generation, because after Maria Theresia and her husband died, their pragmatical, stingy son, Joseph, took over, and he just thought it's ridiculously expensive. There are fewer palace guards, they can't even send them to war. Uniforms are too expensive. They were very similar to the uniforms in the Vatican today, so he dissolved it to save money. But the courtyard is still called Swiss Court in their honor today. And the gate to which we will leave this courtyard in a few minutes' time over there is called the Schweizer Tor and the Swiss Gate, because that was guarded by the Swiss. This is the oldest part of the interior. Here everything starts. This goes back to the early 12th century. Not the facade you see now. The facade you see now is from the Renaissance era of the 16th century. You can see that because of these large arches all the way around the courtyard. All of these arches used to be open arches, but they are still open over there in the back. However, over time, because there was never enough space inside the city walls, they closed up the arches to make more space on the inside. But if you would look behind the arches, you would still see the medieval core of the 12th century. And it was a real castle. If you ask a child to draw a castle, it would draw a square with massive towers on the corners, a moat around it, and the points. And that is exactly what this looked like. You see the Swiss gate, the Schweizer Tor in German, which used to be guarded by the Swiss guard, the Renaissance portal from the mid-16th century, and it was installed by the king who lived here at the time, King Ferdinand I. And he's not that famous, but he had an older brother. He was Charles V. And Charles V, he was Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He was also King of Spain. As King of Spain, he also ruled over parts of Italy at the time. Exactly. There are many connections, and of course all the Spanish colonies, Southern America, Central America, large parts of North America. His younger brother, Ferdinand, he used to live here in Vienna, in called Vienna. He only ruled over the so-called Habsburg hereditary lands, which were Austria, Hungary, a small part of Hungary, Bohemia. By the way, I forgot to mention Charles V also ruled over the later Austrian, back then Spanish Netherlands. You're from Belgium, so you have a connection here as well. So right here on this place, we are in the center of political power in Austria, because right here is the entrance to the offices of the President of the Austrian Republic, Alexander van der Bellen, his name is at the moment. It doesn't sound very Austrian, it sounds more Dutch. Originally he's from, as far as I know, Lithuania. He was just 1 year old when his parents with him as refugees from the Second World War fled to Tyrol in Austria, and he grew up here and then became eventually president of the Austrian Republic. And on the other side, we have the entrance to the Federal Chancellor, where the Chancellor of Austria and the seat of the Parliament and the government. It is convenient that these two, the Emperor Leopold I, who we see here in the kneeling position, grandfather of Maria Theresia, and his court were understandably a little worried about the effects themselves. So they fled the city to Passau in southern Germany to wait there until the plague is over. But before Leopold left the city, he swore that he will commission a memorial upon his return to Vienna. That is what he did. At first it was a temporary memorial, a wooden cross. It was there for several years. The Viennese are very good, long-lasting temporary decisions. And it was still there in 1683, during the time of the Second Ottoman Peace of Vienna, and only after that time planned today's column. So this column as a memorial yesterday, but also as a victory column celebrating the victory over the Ottomans. You can see it from both perspectives. And the official name of it is actually Holy Trinity column, and the Holy Trinity is of course God Father, God Son, the Holy Spirit, all together form one and the same God. And this was exported to all parts of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So you see similar columns in Austria, for example, in Linz, Innsbruck, Klagenfurt, many smaller towns, cities in Austria, or outside of Austria, in Budapest, Prague, even in Liev, there's so this was very popular topic. And the Holy Trinity is one of the most important Christian concepts. Therefore, the number 3, depending on the Holy Trinity, is the most important number. The godly, the heavenly. So this monument is built up mainly on the number 3. It has a triangular layout. It also has 3 main sides. One for God Father, one for God's Son Jesus Christ, and the side facing away from us for the Holy Spirit. And it also has 3 main levels: one for the humans, crowned by the Emperor; one for the angels, the intermediaries that we have on earth. Right on top, in gold, we have the Holy Spirit. So, we are now at St. Stephen's Square. Right behind me is St. Stephen's Cathedral, probably the most important site here in Vienna. And it's also the most important church in Vienna. For the Catholics at least, also for the Catholics, it's the most important church in Austria. It's the seat of the it's the seat of the Cardinal Archbishop of Vienna, who lives in the palace right next to it. It's a building with a scaffolding around it on the lower floors. And it's quite an old church. It was built, the first church was built in the first half of the 12th century, still as a Romanesque church.